3 months ago, I celebrated my 101st birthday. The funny thing is, I didn't celebrate it in a hospital. I didn't celebrate it in a nursing home. I celebrated it the same way I've celebrated birthdays for years. I woke up before sunrise, made myself a cup of black coffee, fed the birds that visit my backyard every morning, then took my usual walk down the old gravel road behind my house. I still carry my own groceries, I still mow my own lawn, and I still climb the porch steps without reaching for the railing. At my age, I don't take any of those things for granted anymore, because I know just how easily they could have been taken away. My name is Walter. If you're watching this, chances are you've thought about your heart lately. Maybe your doctor frowned when he looked at your blood pressure. Maybe your cholesterol has crept a little higher every year. Or maybe you've started feeling more tired than you used to, a little short of breath climbing stairs, a little pressure in your chest that you quietly blame on getting older. That's exactly what I told myself, and I couldn't have been more wrong. When I turned 90, I believed I was still in pretty good shape. I'd spent over 40 years building houses with these two hands. I climbed ladders, carried heavy lumber, worked in the summer heat and winter cold. I thought all those years of hard work had earned me a strong heart. But life has a way of humbling you. Your heart doesn't care how strong you used to be. It only cares how you've treated it, day after day, year after year. One afternoon I was carrying a bag of garden soil across my yard when I suddenly had to stop. My chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, my left arm felt strangely heavy. I remember standing there thinking, "That's odd." I sat down for what I thought would be just a minute. That minute became nearly 20. My daughter insisted on taking me to the hospital. For once, I didn't argue. After hours of tests, a cardiologist walked into my room carrying a thick folder. He pulled up a chair beside me, looked me straight in the eyes, and quietly said something I'll never forget. "Walter, you were lucky. Not healthy, not strong, lucky." He explained that my heart hadn't failed, but it had been working much harder than it should have. Years of high blood pressure, years of rising cholesterol, years of habits I thought were harmless. Slowly, quietly, they had been narrowing the arteries that carried blood to my heart. The frightening part wasn't that I was sick. The frightening part was that I never noticed it happening. Heart disease rarely announces itself. It doesn't usually arrive with loud warnings. It slips into your life one habit at a time. One breakfast, one snack. One year after another. Until one day, your body finally whispers, "I can't keep doing this." So I asked my doctor one simple question. "If you were me, what would you do?" He smiled. Doctors don't usually smile before they change your life. Then he said something that stayed with me for the last 11 years. "Walter, before we talk about what you should eat, let's talk about what you need to stop eating." I'll admit, that surprised me. I expected him to recommend expensive supplements, fancy powders, exotic berries I'd never heard of. Instead, he pointed at foods that had been sitting on my kitchen table for most of my life. Foods I'd eaten since childhood. Foods connected to family memories. Sunday breakfasts, backyard barbecues, holiday dinners. Giving them up didn't feel like changing a diet. It felt like saying goodbye to old friends. But age teaches you something important. Your memories don't live inside food. They live inside you. You don't have to keep eating something that's quietly hurting your heart just because it reminds you of yesterday. That realization changed everything. Over the next year, I slowly stopped eating 7 foods and changed one eating habit that had been silently working against my heart. Not overnight, not perfectly, one small change at a time. And something remarkable happened. My blood pressure started coming down, my cholesterol improved. The afternoon fatigue that I blamed on old age slowly disappeared. Even my morning walks became easier. No miracle, no secret formula, just small decisions, repeated every single day. Now, before we begin, I need to tell you something important. I'm not your doctor. What helped me may not be exactly what your body needs. If you take medication for your heart, blood pressure or cholesterol, please don't stop it because an old carpenter on the internet shared his story. Healthy habits and good medical care work best together. Always talk with your doctor before making major changes. Now, pull up a chair, stay with me, because I'm going to share the 7 foods I stopped eating after turning 90, and why the very first one was by far the hardest habit I ever changed. It wasn't cake, it wasn't candy, it wasn't even fried chicken. It was something millions of people still eat almost every single morning, without realizing what it may be quietly doing to their heart. If you'd asked me 30 years ago what my favorite breakfast was, I wouldn't have needed a second to answer. Bacon, crispy around the edges, the smell filling the whole house before the sun even came up. Beside it, a couple of sausages, maybe a slice of ham if we had leftovers. To me, that wasn't just breakfast, that was home. I grew up on a small farm where mornings started before daylight. My mother would fry bacon in a cast-iron skillet while biscuits baked in the oven. By the time my father came in from the barn, the kitchen smelled like comfort, like family, like childhood. For nearly 90 years, I never questioned it. Why would I? My father ate bacon. His father ate bacon. Nearly every hard-working man I knew started the day exactly the same way. Then, after my hospital visit, my cardiologist asked me a question I wasn't expecting. "Walter, how often do you eat processed meats?" I shrugged. "Most mornings." He simply nodded. No lecture, no judgment, just one sentence. That's where I'd begin. I'll be honest, I didn't like that answer one bit. Driving home, I kept thinking, how can something I've eaten for 90 years suddenly become a problem? It didn't seem fair. At my next appointment, he explained it in a way an old carpenter could understand. He said, "Walter, imagine the plumbing inside an old house." Now he had my attention. I'd repaired enough pipes to know exactly what happens when grease gets poured down the sink. Nothing dramatic happens the first week, or even the first year, but little by little, the inside of the pipes becomes narrower. Water doesn't flow the way it should. Pressure builds. Eventually, something gives way. Then he looked at me and quietly said, "Your arteries aren't kitchen pipes, but they don't like years of abuse any more than old plumbing does." That picture stayed with me because I could see it. I'd fixed enough clogged pipes to know how slowly damage can happen, and that's exactly what frightened me. Heart disease doesn't usually happen all at once. It happens quietly, patiently, meal after meal, year after year, until one day, the body finally sends a warning. My doctor explained that processed meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, salami, and many deli meats tend to be very high in sodium. Too much sodium can make the body hold on to extra fluid. That means your heart has to work harder to pump blood throughout your body. Imagine asking an old pickup truck to haul a heavier trailer every single year. It might manage for a while, but eventually something begins to wear out. Then there's the saturated fat. Our bodies need healthy fats. You don't feel it happening. There isn't a little alarm that goes off, no warning light, no pain. The damage builds silently, sometimes for decades. One thing I appreciated about my doctor, he never told me I could never enjoy bacon again. He simply told me to stop treating it like an everyday food. That small difference changed everything. Instead of saying never, he taught me to think not every day. That felt possible. So I made one simple rule. Bacon stopped being breakfast. It became an occasional guest, maybe at a family reunion, maybe on Christmas morning, maybe once every few weeks, but no longer 4 or 5 mornings every week. That one change alone cut down a tremendous amount of sodium and processed meat from my routine. Replacing it turned out to be much easier than I expected. Other days I'd have eggs with spinach and tomatoes, sometimes plain Greek yogurt with blueberries and a handful of almonds. Nothing expensive, nothing complicated, just simple foods that left me feeling satisfied instead of weighed down. And here's something I never expected. After just a few weeks, I didn't miss the bacon nearly as much as I thought I would. The cravings faded. My taste buds changed. Food that once seemed plain suddenly tasted full of flavor. It's amazing how quickly the body adjusts when we stop overwhelming it with salt. Then something even more encouraging happened. The swelling around my ankles started disappearing. I wasn't as thirsty all the time. My rings fit more comfortably. And when I went back for my next checkup, My blood pressure had already started moving in the right direction. Not perfect, but better. Sometimes we underestimate the power of better. Better is where healing begins. Better is where hope returns. Better is what keeps us motivated to take the next step. If bacon or sausage has been part of your morning routine for decades, I'm not asking you to throw everything into the trash tonight. I certainly didn't. Real change rarely happens through guilt. It happens through consistency. One breakfast at a time. One decision at a time. Looking back now, choosing to make processed meats an occasional treat instead of a daily habit may have been one of the most important decisions I ever made for my heart. But surprisingly, that wasn't the biggest source of sugar in my life. Not even close. Because the second thing I stopped consuming wasn't something I chewed, it was something I drank. And for years, I never realized just how much it was asking of my heart. Sweet tea, soda, fruit punch, even fruit juice that looked healthy on the label. That story changed the way I looked at every drink I picked up. If giving up bacon was the hardest change, this next one was the biggest surprise, because I never thought my drinks were hurting me. After all, I wasn't sitting around eating candy bars every day. I wasn't finishing a whole cake by myself, so I figured sugar wasn't really my problem. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Growing up where I did, a glass of sweet tea was practically part of the dinner table. Every summer, my mother made a pitcher before lunchtime because she knew it wouldn't last until evening. Ice clinking against the glass, fresh lemon floating on top. After a long day working outside, nothing tasted better. Later in life, it wasn't just sweet tea. There was the occasional soda, fruit punch when the grandkids visited, even fruit juice at breakfast because I believed it was healthy. After all, it had pictures of oranges and apples on the carton. How bad could it be? The problem wasn't one glass. It was that those glasses quietly became part of everyday life, and everyday habits are the ones that shape our future. During one appointment, my doctor asked me, "Walter, what do you usually drink?" I listed everything without thinking much about it. Coffee, sweet tea, orange juice, sometimes soda. He listened carefully, then smiled and said, "You've been paying attention to what's on your plate. Now let's pay attention to what's in your glass." That simple sentence caught me off guard. I had never thought of drinks as food, but my body certainly did. He explained something that finally made sense. When you drink a sugary beverage, your body doesn't have to chew it. It doesn't slow down. The sugar reaches your bloodstream very quickly. That causes blood sugar to rise fast. Your body responds by releasing insulin. The heart doesn't just care about fat, it also cares about the constant stress created by too much added sugar, especially when it's consumed every day. Then my doctor asked me a question I'll never forget. "Walter, the last time you were truly thirsty, did you actually want soda?" I stopped to think. The answer surprised me. No, I didn't want soda. I wanted something cold, something refreshing. The sugar was just tagging along. That one question completely changed how I looked at beverages. From that day forward, I started reaching for water first. Cold water, sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon, unsweetened iced tea, black coffee in the morning. Sometimes I'd even toss a few cucumber slices into a pitcher from my garden. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just drinks that quenched my thirst instead of making my body work harder. Do you know what happened? At first, everything tasted bland. After years of drinking sweet beverages, plain water almost seemed boring. But after 2 or 3 weeks, something amazing happened. The sweetness in natural foods came back. Fresh strawberries suddenly tasted sweeter than I remembered. An apple felt like dessert. Even plain tea developed flavors I'd never noticed before. It wasn't the food that had changed, it was my taste buds. They had finally stopped expecting sugar every few minutes. Around the same time, I noticed something else. Every afternoon, right around 3 o'clock, I used to wander into the kitchen looking for cookies, or crackers, or something sweet. After replacing sugary drinks with water and unsweetened tea, those afternoon cravings slowly faded. My energy stayed steadier. I wasn't crashing halfway through the day anymore. Instead of feeling sleepy after lunch, I found myself working in the garden, walking a little farther, reading without nodding off in my chair. Little changes, but little changes have a remarkable way of adding up. One thing I've learned after living more than a century, your body is always paying attention, even when you aren't. Every sip becomes part of tomorrow's health, just as every healthy choice becomes another brick in the foundation you're building. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you that you can never enjoy lemonade at your granddaughter's birthday, or have a slice of pie with coffee during the holidays. Life isn't meant to be lived in fear. One celebration won't ruin your heart, just as one healthy meal won't magically fix years of unhealthy habits. It's what we do most of the time that shapes the direction of our lives. That's a lesson it took me 90 years to understand. Just when I thought I was making real progress, I discovered another problem hiding in plain sight. It wasn't sweet, it wasn't greasy, and many people don't even think of it as unhealthy. In fact, it was sitting quietly in my pantry the entire time. Potato chips, instant noodles, canned soup, frozen dinners, even some snacks with bright green labels that claimed to be healthy. I honestly believed they couldn't be doing much harm. Until I started reading the nutrition labels, and what I found there changed the way I shopped forever. Because the third food I stopped eating wasn't really one food at all. It was something hiding inside hundreds of foods, something most people eat far more of than they realize. Salt. And once I understood what too much sodium was doing to my heart, I never looked at packaged foods the same way again. By this point, I thought I was doing pretty well. I'd cut back on processed meats. I had replaced sugary drinks with water and unsweetened tea. Surely I had found the biggest problems, or so I thought. Then one afternoon, while putting away groceries, I reached for a can of soup. For the first time in my life, I turned it around and read the nutrition label. That tiny little box changed the way I looked at food forever. I'll admit, the print on those labels is so small, I think they expect squirrels to read it. I grabbed my reading glasses, held the can under the kitchen light, and squinted at the numbers. There it was. Sodium, hundreds of milligrams in one serving. Some products had nearly an entire day's worth packed into a single container. And here's the part that fooled me. Nobody eats just one serving. One bowl becomes two. A handful of chips becomes half the bag. A few crackers turn into a whole sleeve before you even realize it. That's how sodium sneaks into our lives, not dramatically, quietly, one bite at a time. When I asked my doctor why sodium mattered so much, he didn't start quoting medical textbooks. He picked up his coffee mug. "Walter, have you ever watered a garden with a hose?" I smiled. "I've done it thousands of times." He nodded. "Now imagine slowly turning the faucet higher and higher. The pressure inside that hose keeps building. If there's a weak spot, that's where the trouble begins." Then he looked me in the eye. High blood pressure works the same way. That picture stayed with me, because I could almost feel it. My heart wasn't just pumping blood, it was pumping against pressure, every single second, every single minute, every single day. Imagine carrying a heavy bucket across your yard. One trip isn't much. But imagine carrying that same bucket from morning until bedtime, every day, for 20 years. Eventually your shoulders would ache. Your back would grow tired. You'd wear down. Your heart faces that same burden when blood pressure stays high. The difference is, your heart never gets to put the bucket down, not even while you sleep. That evening I walked into my pantry, opened every cabinet, and started pulling things onto the kitchen counter. Potato chips, instant noodles, crackers, frozen dinners, canned chili, jarred pasta sauce, microwave meals, processed cheese. At one point, it looked like I was stocking shelves at a grocery store. Then I started reading every label, one after another. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Food after food contained far more sodium than I ever imagined, even foods that didn't taste particularly salty. That's when I realized something. The salt shaker sitting on my dinner table wasn't the biggest problem. Most of the salt had already been added long before I ever picked up my fork. That realization completely changed how I shopped. Instead of opening another package, I started opening my refrigerator. Fresh vegetables, beans, brown rice, sweet potatoes, chicken that I cooked myself, fish a couple of times each week. If I wanted soup, I'd make a large pot at home and freeze the leftovers. That way, I knew exactly what went into it. No mystery ingredients, no hidden sodium, just simple food, real food. Something interesting happened after a couple of months. The swelling around my ankles became less noticeable. My wedding ring wasn't as tight in the evening. I stopped waking up thirsty during the night. These weren't dramatic changes, no fireworks, no miracle, just quiet improvements. The kind that tell you your body is finally catching its breath. One lesson became very clear to me. Convenience isn't always free. Sometimes we pay for convenience with our health. Now, that doesn't mean every frozen meal is bad or that canned foods never belong in your pantry. Some lower sodium options can absolutely fit into a heart-healthy eating pattern. The important thing is awareness. When you know what's inside your food, you get to make the decision instead of letting the food make it for you. That simple shift from eating on autopilot to eating with intention changed more than my grocery list. It changed my relationship with food. I stopped asking, what's easiest, and started asking, what's going to help my heart 20 years from now? Funny enough, that one question made almost every decision easier. But my biggest surprise was still waiting for me, because the next food wasn't salty, it wasn't greasy, and it certainly didn't look unhealthy. It sat in a bread basket on my table almost every single evening. Soft, warm, comforting, the kind of food nobody thinks twice about. White bread. For decades, I believed it was one of the safest things I could eat, until my doctor compared it to something I knew very well from years of building campfires, and suddenly I understood why it had been quietly working against me all along. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Because the last 4 changes I made weren't as obvious as giving up bacon or sugary drinks. In fact, some of them looked perfectly healthy on the surface, and that's what made them so dangerous. The 4th thing I stopped eating: white bread and refined grains. For most of my life, I ate white bread almost every day. Toast at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, 2 slices beside supper to soak up gravy. Back then, nobody questioned it. In fact, when I was young, white bread almost felt like a luxury. Whole grain bread wasn't nearly as common where I lived. During one appointment, my cardiologist asked, "Walter, have you ever built a campfire?" I laughed. "I've built more than I can count." He smiled. "Then you'll understand this." He said, "Dry pine needles catch fire almost instantly. One spark, and they're blazing. But a thick oak log, that burns slowly, steadily, for hours." Then he looked at me and said, "White bread is the pine needles, whole grains are the oak log." That comparison stayed with me. Foods made with refined white flour are digested quickly, causing blood sugar to rise faster than whole grains. Over time, frequent spikes in blood sugar can contribute to inflammation and make it harder to keep blood vessels healthy. I realized something else. White bread never kept me full for very long. By mid-afternoon, I was back in the kitchen looking for cookies or crackers. So